And I do not see housing in isolation, but I think housing nearly more than anything else defines your society, defines the type of society you want. Now, before I deal with the wide vision for housing, the issues alluded to in the motion put down by Fianna Fáil, I would like to say that, in my opinion, we have not dealt in a constructive way with the crisis many people face due to debt. And we've had personal insolvency, but when you look at the numbers who have availed of that, it's too complicated and they're very small. The mortgage to rent scheme is one of these schemes that is great in theory, but will you show me anyone anywhere who has actually been able to avail of the scheme? There are so many crinkles in it, so many conditions that you'd have to fulfil, that in fact you will find that the number of people who have availed of that scheme to date is, in the greater scheme of things, totally insignificant. And we need to look at the problems faced by people on a day-by-day basis who maybe are paying their mortgage in some cases, but are finding it nearly impossible to handle the unsecured debt. In other cases, they have deals done with the bank to tide them over for another period. But there is no long-term solution for a large number of people there. And these are people, if there was a constructive leeway given, who would be in a sustainable position. I would have to say that one change brought in the 4-year plan, and the government often talk about changing the minimum wage, but one very, very aggressive change in the 4-year plan is that we had in the 4-year plan a promise to strengthen and improve the mortgage interest supplement, which was the safety net that people had when they lost employment temporarily and couldn't pay the mortgage, to tide them over. The interest kept getting paid until they got a job again. And extraordinarily, this actually was taken out and finished by this government. And I cannot, for the life of me, as the next Minister of Social Protection, understand the rationale of the Taoiseach in acceding to such an idea. Because unemployment, as we know from looking at the statistics, and as a department would tell her, is that 60% of people who become unemployed get re-employment within a year. But to stop them falling into the spiral of debt, that mortgage interest supplement was hugely cost-effective. I would like to give the rest of my time over to the wider issue of housing, housing policy, and what we believe is the broad policy we should have. It became common by commentators to say that we had too much house ownership in this country and that we should go to continental policies and practices. I have to say that I believe that one of the great contributors to the stability of post-independence Ireland was high ownership of houses. People had a stake in society and owned their houses. And from the very early days of the state, assistance was given to people to own and improve their houses. It was given in direct grants, it was given by tax relief. And it seems that somebody somewhere, these great people who know all the problems but only look at things in narrow financial criteria, decided that in fact it would be much better if we all rented houses or leased houses or so on. I think we need that debate in the first place, because I think they are wrong. The second thing I have always believed is that apartments have a role to play. But for the vast majority of families where there are children, in our climate, our conditions, a house, a conventional house, not a duplex, not an apartment, a conventional house should remain the preferential choice. The third thing I believe very, very strongly is again whether our families and children, because children are the future. Children are the raw material that's going to pay all of our pensions, please God. And if we don't look after them and give them a stable childhood, well, then we cannot, for their own personal benefit and good, but also for societal benefit and good, expect the best outcomes. And therefore, security of tenure, that is, for those who can afford to buy or own their house, means buying your house. And for those who cannot, it means actually getting the local authority house like we used to do. To my way of thinking, security of tenure for families is vital. It is different for populations that are moving, that are young, and that are coming and going. It's a totally different situation. But I think we must focus on the importance of stability for families. The other issue that this government seems to totally ignore is that if you insist in having a policy that concentrates everything into the major cities, if you insist, for example, as you did in rolling back on policies of rural development, of decentralisation and so on, then don't be surprised if you create a housing crisis in those very same cities, because they're expanding too fast, and areas of the country that could provide the houses quite easily are left without people for those houses. And you exacerbate the problem and you create new social problems. And therefore, I think we need to go back and look at our spatial strategies and say that the optimum arrangement would be to try and get every community in the country growing, rather than an idea of depopulating certain areas with strong societies, with strong neighbourhoods, with the provision that already has the sports facilities, the schools, the health facilities, and pushing all the people into new estates unnecessarily, where we don't have the community bonds, the support, be near family and facilities. And I would like to echo what my colleague Deputy Kitt said. There seems to be a policy driven by architects and town planners and so on, that there's something objectionable in the rural house. There's an instruction from the Department of the Environment to the local authorities that they're not to build any more rural one-off council houses. That is gentrification of the worst kind. In other words, you move rural Ireland from being a big community, and you take those who cannot afford to build their own house and you move them out. And all sorts of other barriers are being put in place against people settling in the communities from where they come from. And the upshot of that is old people living without their families around them, stratification of society, and moving people then into towns and segregating them by social class. And we know in cities, in towns, that one of the biggest social challenges we face, and remember, housing's not just about putting a roof over somebody's head, it is about the construction of our society. We know that bad planning in terms of segregated housing in the cities is one of the greatest causes of antisocial behaviour, is also a cause of the issues we challenge every day, where we get large pockets where, despite all the resource put into education, very few of the children can aspire to get a third-level education, etc. How much time have I left? 30 seconds. So therefore, this policy on housing has to be a societal policy. It's not just a financial policy. And once you know what your societal aims are, once you know what you're trying to do, then you should build the financial constructions around it, not the other way around. And to be quite honest, leaving housing policy to central bankers, in my view, is wrong. What caused the bubble was not the person owning one house for themselves. It was that everybody started buying extra houses and speculating on the market. And therefore, I believe we should once again return to the policy that we prioritise and assist each family to own one house.